So look, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. My name is Pat Downs. I'm the CEO of the Institute here at Management Consultants in Ireland, and we're delighted to have Jimmy Sheehan with us this morning. Jimmy is going to bring us through some interesting findings and some research that they undertook with Trinity College there recently, and I think it'll be profoundly interesting to a lot of the members of the Institute because it's in the whole project economy management consulting space, and it's something that you've been doing over the last couple of years, Jimmy, and we're really delighted to be able to share the learnings because a lot of our members will have participated in the study over the period as well, and it's of seminal interest. So for those of you who don't know and aren't members of the Institute, we represent the management consultancy profession here in Ireland, and as part of that we provide I suppose kind of ongoing knowledge sharing in terms of best practice and where the market is at, and learnings in terms of that which may be helpful to our members and so forth and so on. So this morning, as I say, we're with Jimmy, and Jimmy is going to take us out now in a few moments. So maybe if I could just ask you, Jimmy, just to introduce yourself for a second and the topic that we're covering.
Sure, thanks very much, Pat. And look, it's great to be here this morning. And before I start into anything, I'll say thank you to everybody who's online, who did actually get involved in the survey, because it's your answers that make this possible, that give Trinity College, who are the independent research team in the business school there, it's all of that information that comes back that they digest, and they're able to then give us all the stats, and we're able to pull this report together. I'm just going to share some slides here. The plan this morning is to go through some of the highlights, I suppose, from Ireland's project economy. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into then maybe some tax tips around that. So we look at, maybe some of the stats from Ireland's project economy, maybe why consultants are working, why companies are hiring consultants. And then, once you kind of understand the market a little bit better or gain some insights, just some helpful tax tips in terms of how you can build wealth for the future. And one of the misnomers out there is that you need to be, wealthy to build wealth. It's really just about thinking smart with your money. So if you want to take a note, that's my email address there. If you have any follow-on questions, happy to take those. And you'll also catch my my contact details on LinkedIn or on our website, contractingplus.com. If you don't have a copy of Ireland's Project Economy, the report, it's a great report, you can actually download that online as well. It's on contractingplus.com. There's a resources tab at the top of the screen, and you'll find it in there.
We'll send out the link, Jimmy, afterwards to the participants, and we're recording this as well, so that'll be going out to the members who might, for whatever reason, have been able to grab their coffee in time and haven't joined us this morning. So as well as that, all your contact details will be going out as well. So Gramila Market, and looking forward to this, really are.
Great stuff. So Ireland's project economy, just to explain what that means, is one of the things we as a group, everybody on screen here today, everybody within IMCA, everybody within Contracting Plus, and that professional, what we're talking about are independent professionals and independent workers. We constantly need to remind people the difference between independent professional, who work typically in the project economy, although some independent professionals do work in the gig economy, but the gig economy phrase has been brought down by the media, and now when we hear the term gig economy, what we think is a fast food rider on a bicycle with a box on their back full of food. And Ireland does have a lot of those type of gig workers, whether it's in food delivery, whether it's in cleaning, but those people are low skilled and low paid, and they're vulnerable workers. And as a society, we do have an obligation to try and protect them. So it's important when we hear government talk about getting rid of the gig economy, that we try and educate them, as we do as best we can, to say, look, there's two sides of this. There's the high skilled workers, and then there's the low skilled workers. And we can't tar everybody with the same brush. It's a complex marketplace. In terms of the high skilled professionals, it's a great time to be an independent worker, and that has come out of the results. So in terms of looking at who you are, I know you know well who you are, but who is involved in the project economy space, who is involved in answering all those questions, and why independent workers are used and why companies use them. The first thing, as we all know, is for agility. They want to ramp up when it gets busy, and then when business teeters off again, they can say, okay, we don't need that skill set anymore, and we can just park that to the side. Innovation is a big part as well. The biggest great example I think that we will all be aware of is probably Argos. Everyone's familiar with Argos, where you go in and you take the catalogue from the store, you pick your furniture, you go in and you order it. And Argos said, look, there's got to be a better way of doing this. We could probably increase our sales if we managed to deliver furniture to people's houses. So what Argos did is they created a business called Argos Direct, but they did that exclusively with independent contractors. So the people who developed the software where you could order online, they were all contractors. Then they used different contractors for driving the trucks, for managing the warehouses. And okay, that is lower paid contract work. But then people for managing all the teams, project management. And they did that because what they wanted to do was innovate, but they also wanted to reduce risk. And they wanted to make sure that if they did this and it didn't work, their core business wouldn't be affected. But what happened with Argos Direct is it took off like a rocket. And what they then did is they folded Argos Direct into Argos, and it became one business. And all those contractors became employees, and it created more employment within the Argos group, so more net employment for the economy. And studies have shown that, you know, when you're talking to your clients in terms of why they should use consultants and why they should use independent workers, is the companies who do that, who are looking for innovation and agility, who are using a blended workforce, where 11%, that's the key piece there, 11% or more of their workforce are independent workers. Those companies are proven to grow faster, to create more profit, and to create net employment growth across their industry. So 2022 research results show that confidence soared in the Irish contracting market. Contractors, freelancers, consultants, you know, people recognize themselves differently, they label themselves differently, but it was the same consensus. And going back to the point I made earlier, they're all high skilled and they're well paid. And there was a 13% increase in the average daily rate year on year. We'll have a look at that in a bit more detail now in a second. In terms of age profile, the oldest was 85 of the respondents, the average age 49, and the youngest 24. Now, it's no surprise really that the average age is 49, because what we're talking about are people who are capable of coming into a company, seeing what the issue, the challenge, the problem is, and being able to hit the ground running. So you need some experience behind you. It's odd, I suppose, to see a 24-year-old in there, but we don't have the details. But my guess, my educated guess, with that person is probably in IT, with an IT skill, maybe a Java programmer or something like that. And, you know, the experience necessarily, the years of experience isn't always necessary there. It's just about the skill on hand today to program. So average age 49. In terms of the gender balance, 24% female, 76% male, very heavily weighted in favor of the males. And that's strange, because in the workforce in general, it's much closer to a 50-50 split. And so we'd have to ask ourselves, why is that happening? And maybe that's probably a question for next year, in terms of why do we think that more females don't enter into contracting, especially, you know, it's such a flexible way of working. You choose your clients, potentially choose your hours, choose the days you want to work. And as we all know, regardless, I'm a dad of 4, and, you know, I like to think I'm a hands-on dad. But the reality is lots of the parenting often falls more to the mother. In terms of education, again, it goes back, we now have proof, because you've answered the question. We're talking about high skilled workers. We're not talking about people who are in bogus self-employment. We're talking about people who choose to be consultants, who choose to work this way, and 85% or more people have a bachelor's degree or higher. And 16 months is the average contract length coming out of this. Now, that varies across the board. You saw people who might be on a 3-month contract. You might have people who were in a contract for 2, 3, 4 years, but maybe it was just a day or two a week with a client. Other people were in a 12-month contract exclusively for one client working on a project. But over the course of all the respondents, 16 months was the average contract length. That was up from 14 months, interestingly, which was the result in 2021. How many holiday days do you take? Average holiday days are 21. It seems surprising that so many people choose to become self-employed because they want a bit more flexibility, they want to take it a bit easier. Some of the reasons to avoid office politics. But actually, when it comes down to it, we're taking no more holidays than most people in employment, 21 being the minimum requirement for a full-time employee. So it's interesting from that point of view that across the board, now if that's the average, that means some people are taking more and some people are taking less. Some people could be taking less because even in our own business and contracting plus, we'll understand from people in terms of the hours they're working and the days they're putting in, and just having a chat to them saying, look, why are you working so much? Like, surely there's going to be burnout, but they could be doing something like saving for a big life event, whether that's a deposit for a house, whether it's for a wedding, or something else like that. So different people's needs, depending on their age, and we have a slide on that later on as well. So in terms of earnings then, so how much are we earning on a daily basis? So again, in the report on page 19, there's a full breakdown of a lot of different types of skill set, a lot of different types of roles, and you can see all the age ranges there. But when you map all of those together, you can see there that as you get more experienced, I was going to say older, as you become more experienced, your earnings go up. And why is that? It's probably because you've more to offer. You've more value. You're of more worth to the companies. Your knowledge is greater. And the over 60s earning the most amount per day. 565 is the average daily rate, is also an increase. It was €501 in 2021. So that's where the 13% increase is across the board. In terms of why you're working the way you do, you were asked the work itself. Do you feel that that's something you enjoy or don't enjoy? So 85% of people enjoy the work. 85% of you are happy. You choose this way of working because of the flexibility. 83% of the location of the job. You can see them going down there. Interestingly, work-life balance down at 73, still higher than similar studies in the employed sector. But I wonder why work-life balance isn't a little bit higher in that regard. In terms of what's coming up over the next 3 to 5 years, how confident are you about the type of work you do? Will the sector increase or decrease in the next 5 years? 73% of you think it's going to increase and 21% of you think it's going to stay the same. So 94% of people are fairly confident in the market right now. And then again, in terms of Ireland's economy, again, 93% of people feel it's going to either increase or stay the same. Now, note here is that this survey was carried out just before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So we would expect to see those figures drop somewhat, but I wonder how much. It'd be interesting. You can probably answer that yourself. If you were one of the people who said, yeah, I'm one of the 76% who thinks the performance of the Irish economy in 2022 will increase, would you change your mind now massively? Or would you say, move across to stay the same? And even if it stays the same, even if you went from, say, the red into the light grey, that's still a fairly positive place to be, given the way the economy went in 2021. So what I want to look at here is the value of age. And I think this is important because we saw on the slide there around pricing that the older you get and the more experience you have, the more value you are to companies. And I think the value of age is interesting because it's also the time for a lot of people when they've been siloed out of employment. And the main reason for that typically is because companies don't want to create precedents. So you could have a couple of people working in the same company. So Pat could be working in the company, and Pat's a brilliant person. I mean, he's got loads of knowledge in his head, and we absolutely want to retain that. So when Pat's employment contract says he must retire at 65, they say we're not going to do that because Jimmy's a couple of years younger than him. He's going to be there looking for full-time employment, and he's useless. He's dead rubber. We want to get rid of him. So if we give Pat employment to 70, then we've set a precedence, and maybe we need to give Jimmy employment to 70. And that can be one of the reasons why companies say, look, well done, handshake, retire. By the way, do you want to come back Monday on a consultancy basis? And so that happens too. So we were looking at the value of age and the earnings. Back to look at that slide again. So you can see, look at the last two columns there, where the 50 to 59-year-olds are earning €601 on average per day. And the over 60s are earning €650 on average. So the over 60s are actually earning more per day than those in their 50s. However, when you look at the annualized earnings, the over 60s are earning less. So that very clearly tells us that they're working less days. So they're starting to say, okay, yeah, although I'm getting paid more per day, So maybe I'm also more confident. Maybe I've got, more guts when it comes to sitting down at the negotiating table and saying, yeah, look, if you want me, this is how much I'm going to charge. But I'm also, not going to work as many days. I'm going to work 3 days instead of 4. I'm going to work 2 days instead of 3. So people are getting to that stage in life where they're saying, financially, I'm probably okay. Mortgage is paid off. Kids have moved out of the house. They've been to college. Maybe the pension's kicked in. But you still want to keep that mind sharp. You keep on doing what you do. So that's an interesting piece to look at there. And as you can see, as you move back up the scale and people become younger, less experience, less knowledge, and possibly less confidence of coming into a role as a cold person in a company, their earnings go down. I'm happy to take questions at any time, but there'll also be questions at the end if people wanted to jump in. I put this slide in here. I'm going to talk through this a second. So the green pieces there you see, look at the age range at the top. And the green there are what's most important to people in that specific age bracket. I just thought this was really interesting. Funnily enough, those who are under 30, flexibility of hours is the most important thing to them. Okay. And you kind of go, well, okay, maybe they're doing a bit of travel, they want to get out and about, they want that total flexibility. You get into your 30s and rate of pay and flexibility of hours are both important. And I wonder, why is that? Is it that rate of pay is at 30 to 39 age, you're either thinking about or buying your first home, you're saving for a deposit, maybe you're getting married, and maybe you're starting a family. So that's where the flexibility of hours comes in, which is really, really interesting. And then you get into your 40s and the location of the work is more important for you. And then the flexibility of hours when you get back into your 50s, and then flexibility of hours and remote working options, funnily enough, for the over 60s. But I just thought you could almost paint a picture when you look at each of those columns and say, oh yeah, so the 40-year-old guy, I'm in my 40s, so, location of job is important to me. Maybe rate of pay isn't as important because I bought my house, got it at a good rate a number of years ago. Kids are out in nappies, they're kind of in secondary school. Things are a little bit easier, so flexibility of hours isn't as important. And you can also paint a picture. You can picture people in my mind who I would know in those age brackets and go, yeah, I can kind of see why they choose those things. So that's kind of about you, about your earnings, but what about the companies? And I think this is really important. The companies who are taking on consultants, it's really important to understand why they're taking them on. So that's why they're such an integral part of the research as well. And you probably all read that while I was chatting. So you're saying companies are actually using consultants more now. They're saying they're an integral part of the business. Full-time employees take a long time to identify, and this is so true. I mean, the onboarding. I mean, if I've got a project, if I'm a company and I've got a project and I need that project to start, next week, it's going to be a 12-month project. Realistically, it's going to take me 90 days before an employee starts, because I'm going to start the recruitment process. And by the time, they've sourced people, we've done all the interviews and everything else like that, we're probably 4 to 6 weeks down the line. We offer somebody the role, and then they've got 4 to 6 weeks notice period. So you're potentially talking anywhere between 75 and 90 days before someone starts. And then they've got to get up to speed. Whereas if a consultant is coming in to do a specific piece of work, doesn't necessarily need to onboard and do all the political piece, just hit the ground running, bang. That's why they become essential. Companies need them for agility. They need them for innovation. And then companies are saying that the demand, why they're using consultants, in internal company needs. Tight skills market, can't find the employees. Internal company needs essentially is we don't have the knowledge in-house, and we might not need the knowledge in-house. So we're not hiring an employee for that role. We're taking on a consultant who can give us a specific, and I think that word even, consultant, I'm sure you've had things on this, is like when you're working for yourself, when you're self-employed, your title needs to be Ron Seal. It does exactly what it says on the tin. So if you're, you should never be consultant. You should be, consultant to tech startups on how they get funding, if that's what you do. Consultant to, companies who have hit a plateau and are looking for the next step of growth. So I think it's so important, and I know I'm digressing a little bit, but it's so important as self-employed people that we now I'm not self-employed anymore, but I was, but that we actually say, this is what I do, this is the benefit you'll get. You know, because if people don't go out into the marketplace and go, I'm looking for a consultant, I'm looking for a business advisor. They say, I'm looking for this skill set because I need to achieve this. This is my problem. This is the hurdle I'm looking to overcome. So just a back in the mind piece there. And
Jimmy, maybe just to ask you a question there, Jimmy, which
yes,
I think is very interesting, just that you bring that up in terms of the promotion. You know, people self-promotion, it's all kind of a delicate balance and so on. And there's various different avenues. I mean, where do you put kind of, for example, the whole kind of LinkedIn kind of platform in the space, or how do you rate that as an avenue, or do you prefer the more traditional methods, or is it a mix or a blend? What are you seeing?
It's an interesting one. So there's the two answers. If I first go to the research, I probably won't find the page now that I'm under pressure to look for it. But
No, it's okay.
There's a piece in the research that says, you know, where do you find your work? And I will find that shortly. But it was a breakdown. I mean, network was so important in that question. So some people use their existing network. And obviously, if you're new to the consultancy game, you have a network already, but you need to build that network. Some people use third-party recruitment agencies. So they say, look, I've got this skill set. I'm looking for a contract work that fits, you know, here's my skills. And people will find, they will use recruiters to find them a contract position. And, you know, the other thing there is work begets work. So if you're just starting out and you're saying, well, I don't know where to start, maybe look, and you have a skill set, and if your skill set is project management, for example, in the IT sector, you know, you can find a contract recruitment agency who typically have clients coming to them saying, we need a project manager to manage an IT project, and you know, you can find work that way. I think LinkedIn is important personally. I think but it's not the be all and end all. I think what it is when you're going for a job, your CV talks about your work history, your education history, that type of thing. When you're working for yourself, your CV totally changes. So, and your LinkedIn is your online CV. And now what you're saying is, this is a project I managed, and here was the outcome. This is a piece of work I did, and here was the outcome. Here's something I developed, and here was the outcome. So you're talking about my skills and experience. Because if I'm sitting there as a managing director of a company saying, you know, who am I going to hire? I'm more likely to get in touch with the person who says, they've done something, and there's proof there of that, as opposed to just, you know, work experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does perfectly. I mean, we see ourselves, we do some polling on this, and I suppose, again, that metric of age kicks in. So at kind of the more mature level, if we call it that, it's particularly kind of down to networks, existing professional networks that they've built up over decades, for example. So, you know, for them, advertising is it doesn't make any difference in terms of return on investment in terms of that space. It's purely word of mouth, 99%.
It's word of mouth, and it's having coffees with people, absolutely. Yeah.
And then at the other end of the spectrum, kind of the younger entrants into the marketplace, it is kind of virtual promotion, be it, you know, LinkedIn or their web pages or Instagram or whatever kind of vehicle they're using. So there's kind of a blend over the years, but on one end, 99% kind of word of mouth, personal recommendations and references. You know, Jimmy's just an excellent guy. We've used him before. He's your man. Or down at the other end, it could be Maura is good, but she's promoting herself on those platforms. So thank you. Sorry, I cut across you there. Please.
Not at all. No. Happy to digress. And then the companies, in terms of what they're saying, 81% said they're going to increase the use of independent professionals over the next 12 months. So they see lots of projects coming on stream. They see lots of opportunities. You know, so if you're not seeing that, where do you? Comes back to that question: are you LinkedIn and you're networking, and what are you doing? So, I mentioned a couple of these at the start, but when the companies were asked, you know, why they're feeling so confident about hiring independent professionals, and 81% said they were going to. Again, it's that agility to respond to the marketplace, scaling and innovating. On-site skills not available, cost reduction, bearing in mind that often as a consultant, the cost of what you charge the client will be rolled up into the project and will sit on the balance sheet as opposed to sitting on the P&L. And that's important if you're working for American headquartered companies, because one of their metrics, typically they all have a metric which is profit and earnings per employee. So the less employees they have, the better the results are for the management team in those companies. What I'm going to jump into here then is just, I said, a little bit of tax planning in a company versus a sole trader, because it's a question we always get asked. A lot of people operate as a sole trader, because it's the default position. If you go out and you start working for someone and you haven't set up a company or you haven't created a partnership, and a partnership essentially is just multiple sole traders together, the default position is sole trader. And is that the best way of doing things? And often it's not that it's a bad way of doing things, but the question to ask for you, is it the best way of doing things? So in terms of what I'm going to do over the next couple of slides is look at how over the longer term you can put more money back into your pocket. Okay. You've set up as a consultant, you know companies are looking for you, you know you can earn good money, you know how to find a business, you know, and you do all of that. The last thing you want to do is be letting it drip away because you're not managing it correctly. So look, the obvious expenses are there. I'm not going to go through those. You can all look at the pictures and figure out what they might be. But, you know, claim your business expenses is the first thing I'd say. You know, get an app on your phone. I know Pat's with us in Contracting Plus. I don't know if anyone else online is, but just have an app to take a photograph. That's all you need to do. There's other apps out there that will do that as well if you're, you know, if you're with somebody else. But just find one of those apps, take the photograph. You know, that coffee and scone for 2 people, you're doing that networking, that's a tenner a day, 3 days a week, 40 weeks a year. All of a sudden, half of that is coming back. And if I knocked on your door on Christmas Eve, you know, let's say you'd spent €2,000 on coffees and lunches throughout the course of the year, and I handed you back €1,000. That's the tax saving on that. If I handed you €1,000 in cash at Christmas Eve, you know, tell me you'd turn it away and say, don't want that. So, you know, that's what people are doing when they're not a little bit diligent day to day about their business expenses. Pension contributions, look, we're all aware of how tax efficient they are because we constantly hear it. However, as a sole trader, you are limited to how much you can put into your pension based on your age and relevant to your earnings. Okay, so it's a percentage of earnings. So I'm in my 40s at the moment, so I'm restricted as a sole trader. I would be restricted to 25% of my earnings that I could put into. 25% of my earnings. So yeah, there they are. There, we'll come back to those in a second. And that means that if you're in your 50s, your 60s, and you're retired or semi-retired, and what I mean by semi-retired is you're consulting, but you're saying I'm only going to work 3 days a week. You know, you're looking at that flexi time, and you're earning, and I've just taken a sample figure here of €12,500. If you earn €12,500 as a sole trader, you're going to pay tax of €6,500, okay, on the 12.5 grand, essentially at the end of the year in your income tax return. And then you'll say to your accountant, well, do you know what, actually, I'll stick €6,000 into a pension. So you'll stick €6,000 into a pension and you'll get €2,400 back, and you'll have €2,400 now in your hand. You do the same thing through the company, you'll have €3,120 in your hand. The other thing to remember is when you get relief as an individual, as a sole trader, you get 40% tax relief. Okay, so that's the amount that comes back to you because it's just income tax. But also bear in mind that you've paid USC and PRSI on your earnings. Whereas in a company, if the company invoices €12,500 and they put the €6,000 straight into the pension, you've bypassed PRSI and universal social charge. So you're essentially getting 52% relief as opposed to 40% relief as a sole trader. Okay, I'm not going to dwell on that too much because sometimes that can be hard to get your head around if you're not used to that. But what you're essentially seeing there is you have, you know, €2,400 as a sole trader or 3,120 for a 12,500 company payment. There's the rates there. So 30% of your earnings, 50 to 50. Sorry, that should be 50 to 55 on the second line there. That's a typo. 35%, 55 to 59, and then 40% to 60 and over. Okay, so as a sole trader, you're at those restrictions. As a company, there are no restrictions around that. So if you're over 60, you have a good, you know, maybe your pension isn't as high as it could have been, and you're earning, you know, let's say 80 grand a year, and you're saying, you know what, between my, you know, my employment pension, mortgage is paid off, everything else like that, I actually don't need that 80 grand a year. Like if I had 20 grand of that with the other income I have, that's fine. So let me put, you know, 75% of my, you know, let's put 60 grand into the pension for the next, you know, 4, 5, 6 years. That'll top it up nicely by the time I'm 65 or 68. You know, but you can't do that as a sole trader, but you can do that as a limited company. Okay, just something to be aware of. The other thing is, and I make sure every client does this. It's called the small benefit scheme, and it's a voucher for €500. It's €500 tax-free every year. You can take it. It has one voucher, so you can buy a voucher for Tesco and then do your Tesco shopping. You can buy a voucher for Ryanair and go on your holiday flights. You can buy one of the Me to You vouchers, which means you can use it in lots of different shops. You can't get that as a sole trader, all right? But as a director in a limited company, the limited company can buy you a €500 voucher. And if if your spouse or business partner is also working through the limited company, they can get one as well. So it's not a company thing, it's an individual thing. But you're not entitled to that tax relief as a sole trader. So you're just throwing 260 quid away. Okay? Small, but it all adds up. The other thing we're often asked about is employing a spouse or a family member. And what I'm going to say here is you never employ a spouse or a family member to evade tax. Okay? But often, very, very often, what we find is that consultants are out working with clients, and then they come home with their paperwork or their notes, and their invoicing needs to be done, or the banking needs to be done, and bank recs and stuff needs to be sent across to the accountant. And very, very often, they either have a teenager who's looking to earn some pocket money or a spouse at home who's doing that work. Now, if that person didn't do that work and you didn't have the time to do that work, you're going to have to pay somebody to do that work. So you can, once there is an economic value, once there's an absolute reason that you could pay a spouse or you could pay one of your teenagers to do administrative work for you, you should pay them, because they have tax credits that aren't being used. They have tax plans that aren't being used. So in terms of if you had somebody doing administration, and let's say over the course of, you were going to pay them €1,000 a month. So if you said to me, Jimmy, I need you to come in and do some admin for me on a monthly basis, I'll give you €250 a week to do invoicing, to do cash collection calls, to do paperwork, to do whatever the work was, typing, drafting up reports. Now let's say that I'm your spouse, and I'm just doing that because I'm there to help you out, because you're the sole earner. Well, then what's happening is you're not paying me anything, okay? And once you take that €1,000 that you've earned from a client, you pay PAYE, you pay PRSI, you pay USC, and you've €480 left in the family pocket. Whereas if you recognize that payment to a spouse is an actual bona fide payment for work being done, and you pay your spouse €1,000, assuming they have, that should be PAYE, not PAYX, but assuming they have no other source of income, they're not going to pay any income tax. They're going to pay PRSI, and they're not going to pay any USC. So now there's €960 in the family pot. So employing a spouse or a family member where there is a bona fide reason to do so is a great way to keep your tax bill low. Entrepreneurs relief is another relief that's out there. So it's €1 million in your lifetime. Now, you might say, when am I ever going to earn €1 million? And you might not earn €1 million. But if you had, for example, you built up funds in the company over a period of time, and you knew that there was somebody was likely to buy the company from you, or even you were going to liquidate the company at some point in the future, there's a bit of tax planning around it. But if you were, I'm going to say under the age, you're going to do this under the age of 55, because you'll see why in a second. But if this is something you needed to do, you needed to build funds for a certain life event. Maybe you're trying to get a deposit together for a house for your kids. You could potentially avail of entrepreneurs relief within the company, where you pay 10% capital gains tax when the money comes out of the company, as opposed to 33%. Bit of tax planning around that, but again, you don't have that option as a sole trader. You do as a limited company. As a sole trader, you would actually have to physically find someone to buy your business from you, buy your business assets. And a lot of the time as consultants, you are the business asset. As soon as you walk away, the business stops, because the knowledge is the asset of the business. So a company is useful from that point of view. So it's €1 million in your lifetime. You must have owned the business for 3 of the last 5 years. You must have had a minimum of 5% of share capital in the business, and the business must be trading. Okay, so your own limited company. Retirement relief then is slightly different. So let's say you're one of those lucky people whose pension is maxed out, because again, pension is a really tax efficient way of saving. and you start to build up, or maybe you just want cash in the company for some other reason, for a rainy day fund. You can build up cash in your company. And how do you do that? Well, let's go back to the person who's earning 80,000 euros a year, and they're not, they're not putting any more into their pension. They're saying, look, I can live on, let's say, 40,000 euros a year. So they leave 40,000 euro in the company. And they do that. Now you'll pay corporation tax. You will pay corporation tax on that. So let's just round that down and call that there's 35,000 euros left. I haven't done the maths in my head, but just taking a lump off that. So you do that then for 10 years. So in 10 years' time, you have 350,000 euros in the company. And let's say you do that for 15 years, you're going to have over 500,000 euros in the company. If you're between the age of 55 and 64, you can liquidate that company, close that company down, and avail of retirement relief, which means the 500,000 euros sitting in that company in cash comes to you tax-free. That's what retirement relief is. If you go past 64, if you hit 65, the higher bar of 750 drops to 500,000. So you could build 750,000 up to 750,000 euros up in the company. Now, if you're a massively high earner and you've got a lot of years ahead of you, and your spouse or your business partner is part of the company, again, that's at 750,000 euros each. So it's an individual lifetime threshold. It's not for the company. So again, can't do that as a sole trader, because as a sole trader, if you earn 80,000 euros this year, you're getting taxed on 80,000 euros this year, even if you only use 40,000 euros on it. Okay, so limited company is useful from that point of view. But that's us onto questions. That's just some of the services we do in Contracting Plus. And I suppose, do you want me to stop sharing then, Pat, I suppose?
That's great, Jimmy. Thank you.
There we go. Perfect.
Now we'll just bring it back up there, and Now, thanks for that, Jimmy. That was really interesting, I have to say, and there was some great tidbits coming out. I mean, I thought the average length of 16 months was quite encouraging. I would have thought it was quite high, and the holidays at 21. So we're probably creatures of habit there to a certain degree. Just, I suppose, really, and it came through in terms of the age profile, the older age profile, in terms of flexibility of work. What are you seeing in terms of remote working? Or, what sort of feedback, particularly coming out of the pandemic, where we're all on remote working and so on? Where do you see that in terms of the profession at the moment? Or what's your findings?
Well, first, if we look to the findings, before COVID, probably I think it was, I can't remember the figure off the top of my head, but about 20 to 30% of people were working remotely, and about 60 to 70 people were in client offices. As soon as COVID hit, obviously that totally changed. It flipped in almost the opposite direction, a mirror image. A lot of businesses were deemed to be essential businesses, so people could come into the office, and a lot of consultants would be working with those businesses. In terms of my own view on remote working and how it's going to affect it, I think from a consultant point of view, think about the work you do and the companies you work with. If you're working with smaller companies, owner-managed companies, then yeah, some of your work can probably be done remotely, Zoom calls, things like that. But if you're in bigger companies and you're working on bigger projects and you're part of a project team, you're probably only going to have success, if you're in and you're looking people in the eyeballs, and you're seeing people's body language and you're understanding the things they're struggling with. And even going around the office myself, you can schedule a call, Pat, to talk to someone and say, look, I want to talk to you about maybe an area you could develop in, or how we can improve that. But also you could be just walking over to make a cup of tea and hear somebody saying something and you go, that's really interesting, you said that. Why would you have said it like that? Do you think, is there another way? You miss those, impromptu learning moments. And it's the same for consultants, because if you're in a company, what you want to do is you want to be releasing those tidbits of information and helping the people who you're going to leave behind make sure that whatever project you're helping install, that they have the skills and the ability and the knowledge to make sure that's executed excellently. Because when you leave, if everything falls down, that actually is a reflection on the work you did in the first place.
Yeah.
Being able to engage with people and have those chats is going to be so important for business.
No, I mean, that's very much kind of, I suppose, on the money there. And Just actually to that end, speaking of which, we just had two short polls we'll launch as well, just over the next moment or two, if you guys could just engage with that. One of the other questions that came up there, just someone texted me there on it, was the whole kind of sweet spot in terms of optimum clients. And, for consultants, what are you seeing in terms of, is there a sweet spot? Is it a singular client? Are you splitting it between three, from a, or do you have any feed on that?
We don't. I think the research didn't ask that, and would be a good one actually maybe to get the guys to ask next year in terms of repeat clients and numbers of clients. What we did see is that typically people will probably have one client. So about 70-something% of people use an umbrella company, and then the balance then were using their own limited company. Where they were using an umbrella company, they were typically, not exclusively, but typically working for one client. Because they were probably on a contractor. They're saying, look, I'm just starting out. I'm going to take this first role with this client. I'm going to see how it goes. I don't want the hassle of setting up a company. It's not a lot of hassle, but don't want the hassle of setting up a company. And then they kind of get 3 months or 6 months in and go, actually, I'm really enjoying this. This works really well. And then they start, doing that networking. They'll move across to their own limited company, and then potentially start to look for more clients. But I think it really depends, Pat, on what your skill set is. So if you're a Java developer, for example, you're probably working exclusively with one client on one project who needs something developed. Whereas if you're somebody who's helping companies get funding or apply for grants, you're probably, if that's your skill set, you're probably doing a number of different clients at the same time.
Okay. And just on that, in terms of what you're seeing out there, and I know there are certain cohorts, and you mentioned IT clearly a few times as well, but, for instance, a lot of our folks would be in the professional services space, but they also, it's a broad spectrum, a broad church, if you will. Are there any particular areas that you see kind of that are significantly, in terms of the services that are offered, where are you seeing it, for example, not to preordain the answer?
The skill set, do you mean, Pat?
Where the skill set, yeah.
The two biggest by far are IT and pharma, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have an IT qualification. So there's finance people working in IT. There are engineers working in IT. There are project managers working in IT, and the same on the pharma side. So in terms of where's a good fishing ground for you for clients, IT clients are absolutely, and pharma clients are good. Finance professionals are actually, they're from a small base, granted, but are increasing quite rapidly. And then the skill sets, if on the report, if you have a look at page 19, you'll see like there's such a massive spread of different types of skill sets and what they're earning.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting in terms of the report, and we will be sending it out later. And this is an annual report that you've been doing for the last couple of years, Jimmy, and you'll be recalibrating it next year with some other stuff, because I know one of the other things was, that whole kind of area of duration of contracts that we mentioned in terms of how long is your average contract, which would be interesting. But on the pricing metric, I suppose age and wisdom has its value as well. So you can see that escalating. But, what we've been seeing over the period is kind of that uber niche space emerging, where people are really, the more niche they are, their value increases exponentially. And have you any kind of observations in that kind of area?
Honestly, I don't, Pat. I mean, what we tend to do is, again, the accounts and tax. I think if you, and I keep talking about page 19, but you could see something on there. You go, actually, yeah, that's where I fit into. But we typically, I mean, we wouldn't deep dive into that. We don't get the granular detail from Trinity College, and that's what keeps the research independent. But if it's a question, if you said, look, I can chat to you offline. If you said, it would be really interesting from our point of view, if we had a question like this, absolutely put it to the research team and see is there value in that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we did see pharma obviously jumping during the period for obvious reasons, and IT clearly as well. So we're always looking out. By nature, consultants should be looking 6, 12, 36 months out, because you're only as good as your last kind of lunch. So we're always casting our nets out to see what's coming down and what trends are happening. I mean, I would have thought just off the bat that the whole area of logistics is going to be an interesting one moving forward, given the constraints that have been, occurring since the Ukrainian element and the whole kind of area of sustainability and ESG. consultancy in that space seems to be exploding as well, and the requirements in that area.
Yeah, we've seen a number of consultants in that green space. You know, it is starting to kick off, and in a number of different areas. Again, some around consultancy, for you know, grants and things like that. Others around logistics, greener logistics. So there's an opportunity there. If that's a skill set or a background you have, is capitalize on that. And as you say, very niche. Go back to what I said at the start. You know, make sure you run, seal your title, and you know, your LinkedIn profile or your business card or your elevator pitch or whatever you want to call it says, I do this. So when people walk away, they absolutely know what it is you do. And if they find someone who mentions, I was looking for somebody to do this, Pat, I need to introduce you to Pat. He'll help you with that.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it's those questions on repeat clients and stuff like that, which we discussed earlier. I see Bowen asked, you know, about the download, and we'll be sending that out and as part of the presentation afterwards, which Jimmy was kind enough to share. And John Anthony asked, are there any anti-money laundering regulations requirements coming down the pipeline that you're aware of?
No, none that I know of. I mean, the biggest piece from anti-money laundering is if you're involved. I mean, if you're going to be consulting on the movement of money. So it's all about the anti-money laundering is about know your customer. So I mean, any of you who have signed up to an accountant will know that you've had to, you know, give a utility bill and your passport, and that's so the accountant can turn around and say, yeah, I'm looking at a passport, and I go, yeah, that's Pat, and he's given me this address, and I've got a utility bill in this hand that proves that address. You know, and there's a bit of due diligence there to make sure that, you know, you are who you say you are, and you're not funneling money for terrorism or some other reason. So there's nothing that we're aware of, but if something came up like that, we would certainly be letting our clients know that here's things they need to go through, and we'd probably do an information webinar on it too.
Okay, Ona has a question. I'm not sure if it's answered in the context of it, but instinctively I might have an answer for her. Is the value of the contract directly linked to the length of the contract, or are shorter contracts more high value?
It's an interesting one. It's typically anybody we speak to always talks about their day rate, what I'm going to charge. That's easier. It's much more black and white now when it's, say, a contract through a third party. So maybe like through a contract recruitment company where they say they have a 6-month, you know, contract for a project manager in a pharma firm, and it's, you know, X amount of euros per day. Where you're a consultant, you're going into a business, you're saying, look, I have a problem as a business owner, and you tell me you have the skill set that you're able to help me, and okay, I'll engage you for 6 months, and that will involve X amount of hours a week, and what's that going to cost me? I mean, in the back of your head, Una, you're probably thinking, well, I want to earn this much money per day, so you're going to lead with what your price is. So to answer your question, haven't seen a correlation between length of contract, money going up or down, but I also think that if you're going into a client for 3 months to do a project versus going into a client for 12 months to do a project, the natural reaction tends to be to discount for longer terms. But I personally, I wouldn't agree with that. If your value is here for a 3-month project, your value should still be here for a 12-month project.
Mm. And I'd agree with Jimmy on that. I'd also say, just you know, an observation when we talk to people out there, what we see on those sort of ones is that they tend to be tender driven, so it's mission specific. So it's a fixed price project that you're responding to. So you know, the old adage that desperation in a client is sometimes a great quality, but not for too long, because that can affect positively the price. You know, when you need something done, you absolutely need it done and get it delivered, and there is a high value to that. So I would agree with Jimmy, but equally I probably suspect that in the short-term contract it may be, for example, tender-driven is what we see, and it's a fixed price that you go back with, take it or leave it. We can deliver the pup within that context on that timeline, and that's the price. Take it or leave it.
And,
so
and when that comes around, Pat, as well, it's so important that if you're doing those tender projects that you absolutely fully understand what is required of you and what is asked of you in that tender, because what happens is you get scope creep and say, oh, we just want to do this. And you end up working more hours, and they say, oh, it's the same project. So if you've agreed, you know, the parameters here, and the client steps outside of those parameters, you say, absolutely, let's talk about, do we need to retender for that? Do we want to talk about pricing? Because that's not in the tender document. So, you know, you're a valuable asset to that client. So why work for free? You know, when you go to the supermarket, you know, and you're given a list of 5 things, milk, bread, cheese, ham, and I don't know, something else, an apple, you know, when you get to the till, that's going to cost €10. And then you throw in a banana, they're going to charge you for that. They're not going to say, no, it's still €10 because it's all in the same basket. You told me coming in that the basket would be a €10 basket. So, you know, where there's scope creep, make sure you're on the ball and, you know, actually, do you know what? Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at that. Let me see what's involved in that. Let me come back to you with a price for that additional piece of work. You know, have value in yourself.
And the great news on it, I suppose, from the Institute point of view, is we're recognized by the Office of Government Procurement as a preferred institute that the membership accredits you, so that you're accredited to work for the government. We can give you some information on that offline, but we've done some webinars on that as well. So that's an interesting plus to membership. Jimmy, you know, it's been really interesting, and I know you're going to be rolling it out again next year, and perhaps we'll harvest among our own members some additional questions. And you know, I want to thank everyone who's attended this morning. It's been I suppose a really powerful morning. We've had people from all over the world, and that's the power of the internet or the interweb. And so unless there's any other questions that are coming up, I'm conscious of people's time, and we try to keep it strictly within the confines and the parameters of what we said and get them out in good order. So I think everyone seems to be done. There'll probably be some questions coming in afterwards, and Jimmy has been kind enough to say that he'll answer them.
If people have questions, Pat, absolutely look to drop me a line, and you get me on LinkedIn, and my email address was there earlier on as well. More than happy to do that.
All right, and we will be sending out the presentation afterwards, and a copy of the report, a link to it. So look, folks, thank you once again for your time. Looking forward to talking to you at the next one, which is coming up in a few weeks. In the meantime, stay safe, avoid the dreaded plague, and we'll talk to you again. Jimmy, Gramila Magat, Slong the Fall. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
Enjoy your
Take
coffee.
care. Thank you, Pat. Bye-bye.